Welcome to Positive Filter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career with a little self-help around the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope that what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. All right. Hey, boys and girls, Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Filter. I am joined by a very special guest. Everyone is a special guest to me. I am joined by Miss Doctor. Sorry, let me get that correct. I always call people doctor because they earn that degree. Dr. Erica Risberg. She is a PhD in cultural history, but also a podcast host herself. Her podcast is called All Things in the Name of Love. I like that because it's, that's essential to making this world a better place. Where is it coming from? Coming from that place of love and helping other people. But I started listening to her podcast a couple times. It vibed with the Positive Filter message. And I wanted to get her on the show because we kind of brainstormed many topics, but one that really stood out to me was skills that we learn throughout a lifetime. But before we go into our topic, I want to give the good doctor an opportunity to introduce herself.
Thank you so much, Phil. It's such an honor to be on this show. I am an innately curious person. I love to dig, and I love to learn how to connect with other people. That's been my whole drive, my whole life. And so my bigger mission is to help people wake up to that joy and the peace and the love that they really are. And that's why I do my podcast. And that's pretty much been my whole journey, is to get there. So, yeah.
Well, you're there. I guess you're definitely you're helping people. You're helping people through their voice. So take us back. So I gave a shout out for the cultural history. I don't know. Some of the listeners will know that I got an undergrad in history. Shout out to that. Awesome. History majors, which lend yourself to multiple skills, because obviously I work at a career center now, which is not the same as my history degree, right? But it taught me so much. So can you give us an educational background from undergrad to your PhD, how that went about?
Sure. So when I was 12, I decided I was going to get a PhD. I don't know why, but
okay.
I just did. And I looked around. I was like, what topic can I handle long enough to actually get a PhD in? And history was the one thing that stood out. And it was because I love seeing how we lived in different time periods.
Okay.
And connecting with that. And what I found is that the technology is pretty much the only difference between like 1800 and now, like our access to technology and how we use it, because our behaviors are similar, our emotions are pretty cool. And so what I wanted to do was try to figure out like how to connect, because that's been a drive for me, is like, how do I connect with others? And so I got my bachelor's degree was American Studies, because I loved seeing like how music and art and literature all fed into my understanding of how history was. My master's degree was about revolutions, because I didn't understand them. Like, what would cause somebody to be so upset that they wanted to change their entire life?
Systems. Or overhaul systems that are in place that are unjust, right? Like, so many revolutions are because of tyrannical governments that were oppressing. So they got to a tipping point where they couldn't take it no more, and they risked death, whatever. They said, I don't care. I want to change it. So you studied that.
Because it's just so powerful. It's such a powerful message. And then when I went for my PhD, I studied, I did a couple things. My PhD was about cultural theory. So that's how is culture created? Is it like a top down or a bottom up, or is it a mix of the two? And I think it's a mix of the two.
Yeah, for sure.
And while I was there, I worked at a place called the Maine Folklife Center.
Okay.
And I was paid to digitize stories. So I got paid to listen to stories. And that was amazing, because that taught me how to use sound equipment.
Okay. Wow.
I also got a job at Maine Public Broadcasting for a couple of years. So I got to use my voice. So like, this is where the tying in of the skills is. So I love studying people. I love digging.
Yep.
I love trying to connect. That's such a big thing. It's like, what is different from you and me, and how can I get around those differences to find that
Common connection.
connection?
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then, so I have this recording background, I have the storytelling background, I have radio background. And then about 10 years ago, my dad died, and I went on a spiritual quest. And I'm not saying that lightly, but it was really devastating. And I was like, okay, there's something deeper here that I need to go within. And so I just started meditating, and about 4 years ago, I took a vow of peace.
Okay.
And that was because I felt like I got overwhelmed with the violence in our society.
Yes.
And I was like, I can't do this anymore. And what triggered it was the Paris bombings.
Yes.
Because people were dancing.
Yeah.
They got killed, and it was just like, this makes no sense.
Right. Senseless violence. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know what it was about that specific instance, because there have been other instances of senseless violence, but that one for some reason just really pushed me over the edge. And so then I started working with a woman who does energy healing and clearing out old beliefs about myself. And now I share what I do and know to help other people just recognize that they can use all these skills that they have. Another skill I have is I've been baking since I was 4.
Oh, wow. You're a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
So
liberal arts, right?
Yeah, liberal. And we're going to tie back to that. So were you, when you said you were 12 years old and you said, I'm going to be a PhD, were you always successful in the classroom? Were you always like in advanced classes? Were you a great writer? Did you get some of that early on encouragement to say, when I will become a PhD, they're like, yeah, I can see that? Or people were like, what are you talking about, crazy little girl? You know what I'm saying? What was it?
So I was always a good writer. I was dyslexic.
Okay.
So I had serious self-confidence issues about being able to read.
Yes.
And I just knew it. It was like an inner sense. I didn't really share it with everyone.
Okay.
Because it was just like this, I know I have to get this. I don't know why I have to get this, but I just have to get this. And it was hard. I mean, my first semester of grad school, I had to read 3 books a week.
Yeah. So that, as a dyslexic, was that challenge addressed early on in school? By the time you got to college, you was, getting special services at the disability office, or you literally had to like really push yourself on the low with dyslexia?
It wasn't acknowledged until I was 17.
Okay, got it. Wow.
So everybody thought I was lazy and an underachiever.
That's not fair. Yeah.
It's not fair, because it's just but my parents recognized it, and so they read books to me on occasion when they could, but like when I had gotten to high school and I had to read Moby Dick, they couldn't really do that. And that's what my teacher found that out, because his prep for SATs was having us go through these old books and finding all the words we couldn't identify.
Yes.
And I come up with 10.
Oh, yeah. He's like, what's going on?
It's like, no, there's like 200 here. What's going on, Erica? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't, because my mind would skip over the ones I couldn't recognize.
Gotcha. That's difficult.
Yeah.
So it's like you have championed so much already just by going to get a master's, because you had an actual obstacle before you even started the classroom with the dyslexia. And then you push yourself. But you had, which is interesting, because I'm still afloat. I don't know what I want to do. But you had that in your mind, like the vision of getting a PhD. So you probably could push through those obstacles early on, because I'm pretty sure that with your trajectory, that your degree is going to take a lot of reading and writing, like very intense reading and writing. As you said, 3 books in 1 week. Come on, that's crazy. It
was insane. It was insane. So what happened my first semester was I'd read for about a half hour.
Yeah.
And I would fall asleep, like a deep, deep sleep for about 3 hours.
Oh, Lord. Because you overworked yourself, right?
Because I overworked myself. But then when I woke up, I could finish it.
Okay.
It was wild. It was like, and then by the end of the semester, I didn't sleep anymore, because it felt like what the context was, I got divorced. I moved 140 miles north of everyone I knew. I didn't know anyone. And I wouldn't allow myself to fail.
Yes.
So those are the contexts. It's like, that's it. So if these are my parameters.
Yes.
I've got to get through this.
100%.
And so my brain kind of rewired itself. It's like, oh shit, I don't have, sorry, but like, I don't have any alternatives. I have to go through this.
Yes.
So what am I going to do? And something in my subconscious, it's like, oh, she's serious. She's not going to give up. Yeah. We have to work around this. So that's why I say I was dyslexic, because something in that semester changed the way my brain is wired.
Well, 100% too. And I think that sometimes when you have the vision of something at the end, you already set determined, like, I am going to finish this no matter what. If you set that in your mind, it's almost like that come true thing. Then the small steps in between, reading the books, the day to day, it'll suck still. It still sucks. But you see it and you're like, I'm going to push. As opposed to someone that's aimless, like if you didn't have the vision of a PhD, you might be like, it's not worth it. I'm gonna just throw those books to the side. But you had that, like that marker, that success marker, and you chased it. And that, obviously when you have obstacles within that, if you had the goal, sometimes it's easier. I'm not saying easier, but mentally intrinsic motivation. Like you're motivated because you know what you're doing. You're like, you have a purpose for it.
Right.
But all that encompassing, and obviously we said the subjects of the skills you learn, and we both have that connection. So I'm gonna let you share more. What are some life or professional skills that you actually applicably learn from your studies over time? Like things like, for me, for instance, and I'll just get real quick, is that from my history major, I learned how to synthesize what I read and articulate it to someone else, because we read so much that when I read something, I can explain it to my wife. And I didn't realize that was a skill until you go out into the world, you have to read something and convey that message to someone else.
Oh, that's a huge skill. One of the skills that I have is I can hear, like on a deeper level, what somebody's saying to me. I hear the words, but I hear the deeper things, so I can actually sense how their thought patterns are. And that's because I study cultural theory. It's like, I have to figure this out. Like, how are you thinking and how can I get to you through my communication? Another skill, research. I am so freaking good at research, but it's really fascinating because I follow my intuition too. So like, I just did a research project and I pulled out this box and I thought it was going to have stuff that I was going to read. I picked out one file. I was like, no, this is not, I don't even need to look at the rest of them, because I just sensed that this wasn't, but like I found other stuff that was relevant, and it wasn't in things that were particularly like, why would you look here? But like, I just kind of knew. And that's because I've been doing research since forever, like 30 something years of doing research. And so like, I just have this innate skill of, I can find stuff. And then for my personal life, like I decided a few years ago, I was going to get into nutrition. And I just use those research skills to like find out supplements and figure out how my body works. And so like, that's completely applicable in any other way that I need. With my cooking, I'm using those measuring skills and everything to make my own lotions and facial products. And because I use essential oils now, it's like, oh, it's the same skills. I'm just transferring them to a different modality.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I just look at what have I mastered, editing sound. I've been doing that for 10 years because I've done voiceovers. That's ridiculously applicable.
Yeah.
And knowing what to me sounds good is going to be different than somebody else, because I started 10 years ago.
Right.
And voiceovers is a different level, I guess. So
it's great. And you put that all together, and over time, it's just like being open to experiences and trying new things. Like now, because of podcasting and forcing myself, I can edit sounds. But one of the things that really stuck out to me was finding a deeper meaning in things. obviously the context below the context. And I
Mhm.
know that you also help people individually. Where is that skill played out in you helping people on an individual level?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I'll give an example recently, and she's a friend of mine, and we went to see each other for breakfast a couple weeks ago, and I tuned in, and I was able to feel like what I did was I gave her the opportunity to tell me what was going on in her
Mm-hmm.
life more deeply because she felt safe,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I was bringing. I was like, I'm letting my guards down so you don't have to feel like you have to talk lightly with me. You can talk
Yes.
about deep stuff, and just giving that, that's a lifelong skill that I've developed really deeply, is just, I want to make sure that whoever wants to connect with me, if they feel like they have to tell me something, I want to make sure that they know that they're being fully listened to.
Well, I think that just kind of goes along with the high, all different types of intelligence. And from what I'm hearing, you have a high EQ, emotional
Hmm.
intelligence, and a skill. And I think the skills kind of translate to active listening and listening to people. And obviously, over time, when you're listening to those stories, your active listening skills are coming off, where your antenna, your spider sense comes off. Like maybe this person is saying they're okay, but I'm reading their body language, and their body language and their tone of voice and all that is letting me know that there is something more concerning going on. So I think
Hmm.
that's probably over time, those skills. So with these different skills that you have, um, for someone else, how would you encourage someone else that's studying liberal arts, such as both of us? How would you encourage them to tune into those skills and figure out if they're good at stuff? Because a lot of people can't see it. How do I talk to students a lot, but I want to know your
Well,
point of view. How do you tune into those and say, you know what, I'm not just a history major, I'm a history major with all these skills that are related to getting a job and helping people or making the world a better place, etc.
Well, for me, because I went the traditional route, I
Yeah.
did research and stuff, and then it's just kind of evolved. Is like, what brings me joy? Like, of all the skills
Hmm.
I have, what are the ones that I enjoy doing? And find out how I can apply them in different ways. Like, I did a
Hmm.
project with the Oregon Historic Trails Advisory Council a few years ago, and they're talking about the Oregon Trails, and there's 16. Who knew, right?
Hmm.
Um, and and so we picked one of them, and I was like, you know what? You have these diary excerpts, right? What
Right.
would happen if we put voice to those?
Right.
And they're
Gotcha.
like, we've never thought of that. I said, what if we do 360 panoramas of some of the sites so people can actually see what it was like to be on the trail in a wagon in 1840? And, going down these crazy hills, like, then they can actually see it. So you're not just reading a diary, because, I mean, diaries are amazing,
Hmm.
but when you feel it,
Hmm.
then you're going to experience the history. So, like, if you can see it, like, if you can see the diary, if you can allow yourself to, like, perceive things in a way that other people, I've always done this, I've like, well, you've always done it this way, what
Yeah.
about this?
Yeah. Innovation. Innovate.
Yeah.
And you found out innovation, from what I'm hearing, is what made you happy, what made you curious, like you said, you started this journey because you're curious, want to ask questions. And so you
Hmm.
figured out, like, over time, I could do this boring, quote unquote, boring research because I'm so curious about it. I find it fun. I find it joy. I like helping people. I like cooking and nutrition. I like editing and sound and storytelling. So you kind of
Hmm.
just you kind of went backwards and more like, instead of the end goal, my job, you went through like, uh, what do I get joy doing? And then I'll finesse and find a job out of that and
Hmm.
make it work backwards.
Yeah.
If that makes sense, right? Like,
Yeah, it totally makes
what are you
sense.
interested in? What makes you find joy? And then hopefully, ideally, those things could get you a job and get you money,
Yeah.
but you're going joy focused first rather than
Hmm.
outcome job focused second
Right.
or first.
Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
if you want to be a doctor, the joy part first would be like, I like helping people. I like healing people. I like learning about body parts.
Hmm.
Then you do that, and then you go backwards and say, okay, that's something a doctor would do.
Hmm.
I don't know. Is that kind
Yeah, it
of
totally
along?
makes sense, because it's you know, if I just go, is PhD really?
Yeah.
a little challenging there,
Yeah.
but it was a, does this bring me joy? Like telling story, like trying to figure out like how, so my dissertation was on how people in rural and urban communities in Bangor, Maine, listen to radio, and how this, like, how was that a whole thing? And like, if you're urban, you have electricity in 1905. If you're rural, 2 towns over, you don't get it till 1940. So like, what's, like, all that was so curious because I didn't know what the end result was. I didn't know what the story was going to be, but I found all these little pieces that were so curious. And it was like, this is really, this is definitely something that I could put in. And this is something I can put in. I don't know how it's going to look yet, but the end result came out from everything I did.
Dope. That's dope. So you're going through this. Do you, as a PhD, right? Do you have an opportunity to teach? Do you teach right now?
You know, what's sad about the current structure in education is there's a lot of adjuncts.
Yes.
And adjuncts is a really bad scenario for anyone who teaches, because you don't really get to connect with the teacher. You don't get to connect with the students.
Yeah, because you're not there that long, right?
Right.
You jump in and jump out as
right.
an adjunct. You don't get to just build a foundation, rapport, or relationship. Unless you're tenured and you're there all the time.
Right. And tenure jobs are really hard to come by.
Yes.
And so I was like, you know, I could adjunct, and that wouldn't bring me joy.
There you go. Back to our root question.
Because I love connecting with people. And if I can't connect with them, then I don't really know why I'm doing it.
Right. So for the listeners too, someone that got to the PhD level, when you completed your PhD, what was some of the career options that you took into place to use your degree? Or like, what are some of the things you're like, connection is one of my main things. This is one of my main things. With this PhD, I'm going to pursue these things because my passion is more like helping people and all that stuff. Take us to that. You walked across the stage. Take us to it when you walked across the stage and your thought says, now that I got it, I hit the goal again in my PhD. What am I going to do next?
Well, it was like, I'm done.
Okay.
So, and it was a very weird situation because I graduated in August, and so I didn't walk down I had my own little, it was really cool. I had my own little private party, which was really awesome.
Yeah.
But I was supposed to work with the Maine State Museum when I graduated.
Okay.
And their budget came out in July. And they got a budget cut, so they couldn't hire me. So I was like, okay, well, that was my dream job.
Yes.
So as a gap, because my student loans came due September 1st.
Lordy, yes.
I worked at L.L. Bean for 3 months, picking orders for Christmas.
Yeah, you gotta keep it real. You gotta do what you gotta do.
Yeah, and then we moved out to Washington State in January. And because I was like, the whole goal was the PhD.
Yeah,
like
that
I
was
didn't
that
have
was
a
it.
Post goal. Like that was a problem. It was like I didn't have a post goal. I was like, this is the goal. Like I've been doing this since I was 12.
Yes.
I got it. I'm amazing. And then I have a PhD, which is really not a good energy to bring anywhere.
Okay. Yeah. Because I felt that in certain aspects where you say like, you just, like you said, that placeholder is that you get it and you put so much effort to it, and then it's like, then what? You know, like for instance, anyone that's like a NFL guy, right, that makes it to the league, that was his ultimate goal, is to make it to the NFL. And then he makes it to the NFL, and then he's like, what do I do next? Like, I went to college, but I didn't really, what's life post NFL? And then they had to struggle with that. And then some of them are broadcasters, and some of them, you know, go into behind the booth. Some of them go to, you know, since I learned these skills in football, I'm a coach. I coach other people. But that's definitely a really hard transition when you put so much energy into a goal, and then you actually celebrate and you obtain it, but then you're like, what next?
Yeah, it's hard. So it was, you know, I bumbled around for a few years, frankly.
Yeah.
I ended up working in an engineering firm, and then we had like multiple family deaths. It was like my dad, his mom, his father, my uncle, my grandmother, his aunt, his uncle. Like, it was just like in the space of 6 years, we lost like
Wow.
9 people. And then it was just like, what just happened? It was just overwhelming.
Yes, yes. And so take us to the drawing board when it was like, yo, I'm a, now I know I want to help people. I want to do a podcast. I want to do all this. I want to do the hook. You briefly talked about that spiritual journey.
Mm-hmm.
That came after the PhD, right? The spiritual
Yeah.
journey. Take us to that real quick.
Okay. So, dad, repressed his emotions his whole life, gained like, he was 400 pounds when he entered the hospital, had pancreatitis from drinking 2 gallons of cider a week. Yeah, really bad. And then he became paralyzed from a staph infection for 3 months. And I had to fly back from Washington to Connecticut 3 or 4 times in the space of that. And his death hit me really, really hard, because it was this awareness of, he repressed everything he wanted to do.
He wanted to do. Okay, got it. So how did that come up when he said, yo, did he tell you on his deathbed, like, hey, these are things I wish I could?
He couldn't.
So how'd you know no, when I say he repressed it, how'd you know those were goals of his? Did you read his journal? Like, how'd you figure out, like,
I
wow,
felt it.
You felt it.
I felt it. And it was like this, okay, Dad, you are an amazing person. You're sweet, you're sensitive. You don't know how to communicate that because you're a 1950s male.
Yeah.
And 1950s, 60s, 70s, like he was in high school in the late 50s.
Generational, that generational.
Yeah, generational. So he didn't have a chance to express his feelings like he could. And so he ate. And he got fatter and fatter and fatter. And I saw it through his life. I saw instances of him
eating.
Yeah, and not just showing up for himself and not loving himself. And so when he died, I was just like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm not doing that, because I'd been doing that on a like post grad school, like fumbling around. I was like, okay, so I had to go back in, and first start meditating. And I did this amazing meditation by Mind Valley's founder, Vishen, and it was just a 7-step thing where you, every single day, the one that stood out for me is every single day you forgive someone.
Okay. Power of forgiveness. I learned about that in the Science of Happiness. Forgiveness and reconciliation is very healing, because it's almost like wearing a backpack and carrying it with carrying bricks subconsciously. And over time, if you there's a difference between forgetting and forgiveness, right? Like letting go of things, and still advocating for yourself. But the more you hold on to those bricks, it just weighs you down. So I love that exercise. We start thinking about forgiving people. Like, I remember one of the exercises during that course was write a letter to someone that hurt you, seal it up, and then let it go. You wrote the letter, it's done. Things like that. So that was very healing for you too. Reconciliation.
Oh, that was ridiculous. Yeah. I mean, there were a couple of people in my life that I had to forgive a couple months worth.
Yes.
Just every day just showing up and say, I forgive you, because I had to get that energy out, because I didn't want to carry it anymore.
Yes.
And from that, what came was I ended up quitting my engineering job, because I was like, okay, I'm done not doing what I love. And I started taking voiceover classes.
Gotcha.
Because that's another love I have. And so when I moved back to Connecticut to take care of my mom after my dad died, and then my partner moved to Portland, Oregon, and when he moved, I moved back with him, and just started hitting the ground and going, okay, I'm a voiceover artist now right now. Well, that's not quite what I am. I do it, because you're like, I am, what am I?
Yes.
And you're a composite of all your gifts.
Yeah, composite all your skills too, right?
Yeah. And so yeah, I do voiceovers. And what's more interesting is all of the learning I did at the Maine Folk Life Center, where I listened to really good interviewers.
Yes.
I was like, I can do this. This is actually a gift I have, is I do this. And so So why don't I take all that voiceovers where I had to learn how to edit like for 10
Mm-hmm.
years? I'm not an
Yes.
expert, but I'm good at it
Good
and
enough. Yes.
good enough and use that. And as I've been doing my spiritual work, I started working with a mentor 4 years ago, and she helps me get into that subconscious stuff.
Yeah.
And so I don't have to carry it anymore. Like if I have a limiting belief of, okay, I'll give an example. All right. So I was born with a dislocated hip, and I was in a body cast for 1.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Traction 6 months in a body cast. And so my little self, terror.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that this is going to help me walk. I just know that I'm trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had this limiting belief that I was trapped.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's helped me get to that so I can see that it's not me, it's a perception I have.
Self-limiting behavior. You put
Right.
those limits on yourself. Your mind is a very powerful tool.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you feel like you're trapped, then you become trapped.
Right.
If you mentally feel like you're free by saying those affirmations or beliefs about yourself, those beliefs become actions. So
Mm-hmm.
usually it's like, a lot of people think that, I agree with you, like sometimes actions, they think actions foresee beliefs, but if it's beliefs that foresee your actions, that
Mm-hmm.
behavior, those messaging that you put to yourself leads to how you act. So if you have the limiting belief that you're limited or you're not capable of such and such, then you already don't even start. But
Right.
if you have the mental part that says, I am capable of X, Y, and Z,
Mm-hmm.
and what are the things that are actions that X, Y, and Z do, and you just start acting like that, then you become it. Like if I say I want to be a PhD person, what are the limiting beliefs of a person that's PhD? They're good at research. They do this. I can do the actions of that, learn how to research, and then I can become a PhD. But
Mm-hmm.
you have to have the beliefs about those things that precede the actions.
Right.
Yeah. I think I sounded real smart there.
You were.
I don't know. Sometimes I'm impressed with myself. I don't know. So you got on this journey, you got the coach, and then how did it lead to you actually starting a podcast? Those skills that you built over time.
So my intuition was like, you could do a podcast. I'm like, okay, what's a podcast? And she tuned in because she connects with non-physical energy. She's a channel. And so she's like, well, I'm hearing that it should be called All Things in the Name of Love. And then I had to go through the whole process of getting out of my own way, because that's a whole thing.
We do. Yep, same here.
And so for about 6 months, I was just recording myself with the great ideas and sending them to my friend Angela and not posting anything. And then I was like, I really have to do this. I really have to do this. Oh my gosh. But it was like, what are people going to think? And it's like, well, anyone who wants to hear it will hear it. And anybody who doesn't want to hear it isn't going to hear it.
Oh, well, I love that.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. I did that too. Paralysis by analysis. I dreamed up the first idea of my podcast in December and didn't release my first episode till April the following year. Same thing. I was in my own way. But luckily for friends and people, like I have my friend Sam Nang, he would just keep on saying, can't wait till Positive Filter comes out. And I said, yo, stop telling everyone I'm going to do this. And he kept on telling people. So after a while, I was like, if I don't release an episode, they're either going to think Sam Nang is crazy or think I'm full of it, so but I got in my own way. So I believe that too. I was just like you. So we're hitting up some good time. We definitely got to do a follow-up, but tying in all those skills, what would be, one concrete tip you can give for the listeners of this episode about life or whatever, in regards to their skills? Maybe one concrete tip for the skills.
Tune in, give yourself some quiet time. Like turn off your phones, turn off the internet, turn off everything, and let yourself sit with yourself for I know this could sound like a lot of time, but a half hour.
That's forever for me. Shoot.
Yeah, I know. And just put your hands on your heart and breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth. And just listen to what your heart wants to tell you.
Okay. Not your head.
Not your head. No, your head's really good at keeping you from paying attention to what your heart wants.
Okay.
Because when you connect with your heart, you're going to find out what brings you joy.
That's the part. And then back from what brings you joy, you can go backwards and say, what skills do I use when I'm searching joy?
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, helping others. What ways can I help others? And you find
Yeah.
those skills there, because you
Mm-hmm.
listen to what makes you happy is helping people. So
Mm-hmm.
like, I love that.
Thank you.
So this is another part. I kind of surprised you, but this is called shot for shot.
All right.
So you get to ask me any random question not related to the episode. I get to ask you any random question. And usually, who wants to go first? You want to go first? I'll go first.
I'll go first.
Okay. Any random question?
What is one thing you did as a kid that you absolutely love that you're not doing anymore?
Oh, not doing anymore?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, because I'm a big kid and I still do it all the way. I'm serious. I like Pokemon. I still play Pokemon. I like video games. I think just limiting time, I would say I don't watch movies as much as I used to. I used to love watching movies. I would like literally, I was a movie fanatic, especially anything related to fantasy and Star Wars and all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, just with time, I don't watch as much movies. I don't even really watch Netflix as much, but I know that used to bring me a lot of joy. My favorite movie, I would watch the same movies over and over again. I had no problem doing it. One of my favorite movies is Forrest Gump. I swear to God, I've watched that about 30, 40 times.
That's awesome.
I haven't just sat down and really slowed down and watched a movie in a long time. I really enjoy that. I really enjoy stories in the form of movies. I'm a big movie fanatic, so maybe I need to get back to watching movies.
Yeah.
Because I do all the other things I still want to do. All right, I got my question for you. So you lived on the East Coast and you lived on the West Coast. You said Connecticut and Portland. Please describe which one you like more and describe the vibe of those places. I've never been. I've been to the West Coast, like San Francisco, but I've never been to Portland or Washington. So, for someone that never been there before, also describe the vibe of those places.
I prefer Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
No freezing rain.
Yeah.
And when I grew up in Fairfield County, Connecticut, and what I found was everybody wanted to know how much money you made and what you did for a living.
Right, because where's that located to New York? Is it close?
Hour and a half north.
Yeah, man, he is. Yeah, I get that vibe. That's DC.
Yeah.
Who are you? What do you do?
Right.
Pomp and circumstance and status.
Mm-hmm. And that never felt good to me.
Mm-hmm.
Never. Like, I was the kid who would talk to geese and hug trees and everything. So like anything that wasn't that didn't make sense to me. So in that instance, Portland's a lot. Okay, so what I say, East Coast is Puritan.
Okay.
Like the whole Puritan, like you're worried what everybody else is going to think about you. You're always judging yourself because you don't know how anyone's going to take what you see. West Coast, especially Portland, is like, yeah, whatever you do is cool. And that's shocking. That's really shocking for like an example I'll give. So on the East Coast, women go into the locker room and they wrap themselves in towels like nobody, like if you see like a hair sticking out, it's like a bad thing. It's like, and they'll dress with the towel on. East Coast. West Coast, throw the towels off, get dressed because it's easier. It's like, that's such a radical thing.
Yes.
So that's taken a little while to get used to, but what I like is just the there's still judgment because we're human, right?
We're human race, yeah.
But there's more opportunity to explore that part of me that still loves hugging trees than I ever could on the East Coast.
Yeah, a little bit more free. I know that. Yeah. I mean, I went to like not the West Coast, but Austin, Texas, like that for me. I love Austin.
Nice.
Just real chill. I mean, I definitely fit the vibe. I've noticed culturally I don't fit in with that either. I like just people that are chill and I don't know. I kind of like that West Coast vibe of openness, but opportunities are here in DC for me. My wife don't want to leave, but I do notice that like one of the things I try to get away from is like I never introduce myself as what I am. I hate when people say, "Hey, what's your my name is Philip Wilkerson," and they say, "What do you do?" And I throw them off a little bit by saying like, I'm a husband. I got 2 kids. They're like,
nice.
I meant like for a job. I'm like, technically that's my most important job.
Yeah.
That's my identities. And then I tell them, oh, then I work at a university, blah, 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 blah. But it's like, I don't want to lead with that. That's not how I lead my life. That's not what leads me.
Right.
So I don't introduce myself with my job first.
I like to ask, how do you occupy your days?
Well, technically work until I could. If I was free, I would do different things.
Right, but I mean, like, but it's a shift in perspective, because I'm not saying, so what do you do for a living? It's like, how do you occupy your days, or what brings you joy?
I love that.
Because it's just this whole different, you get out of that, how many figures do you make, or like, what social status should I put you in? I had one woman when I was living in Connecticut look at me and say, darling, what do you do?
Yeah.
I said, what do you mean? I'm in grad school. She said, no, darling. What do you do? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm misunderstanding the question. Said, no, darling, what do you do? I said, oh, you mean my job? Oh, yes, darling. What do you do? It's like, I work in a mortgage company while I'm working in grad school. What? And she's like, oh, how lovely for you. And she turned around and walked away. I was like, what is that? What is that? Like, you were just trying to marginalize me because you can't see that I'm not different from you.
Yeah, I know. That's why I say I really don't care what people do for a job. I'm gonna start asking them, like, what do you like to do for fun? That's probably gonna be like, hi, my name's Philip Wilkerson, and nice to meet you. What do you do for fun?
Yeah.
That'd probably be more of my leading question rather than what do you do for work?
Yeah, I like it.
Or tell me about your family, or where you're from. I like that too, like where you're from. I love learning about people's hometowns. Tell me about your hometown. I think there's so many other questions you can ask about someone rather than the first one is, what do you do for a job?
Right, because that's going to shut you off.
I'd rather get to know other things about you rather than your job. So this has been a great episode. Obviously, we're going to do a follow-up or get to, collab together in your show. But I really thought it was a pleasure,
Thank you.
For what it is, this kind of being open and flexible, being on my show, and also just the journey. I took so many notes that it's crazy, like just ideas for me as well, learning what to do to help students, because I work with a lot of students in higher ed that don't know those skills. And that's like, you can study anything. Just think about, go back to the root question, like what makes you happy, what makes you interested, and we'll work away from there. We'll go out from there, we'll find jobs so that you can tell mom and dad that you're looking for a job, but we're going to find something that aligns with your passions.
Yeah.
So this is a great episode. And so now the stage is set. Shout outs and plugs. This is an opportunity for you to shout out anyone, coaches, mentors, family, friends, whatever, and then plugs any ventures and things that you're working on, so that I put in the show notes so that people can follow up and get connected with you. So
okay, first and foremost, big shout out to my mentor, Heather Christian Strang. She's amazing. I can't speak highly enough about her, about how she's helped me clear out all of the subconscious stuff and help me get more connected with who I am. It's just, words can't describe how much I love her. And she's a big one, because she's the one that got me to do this in the first place. So I'm very, very grateful for her. Grateful to my partner, Steven, who supports me and puts up with all the recordings.
Yes, I got that. Shout out to my wife. She does the same thing. Shout out to my wife. She does the same thing.
Yeah, and all of my friends who listen and tune in, and everyone who tunes in, because this is scary sometimes. It's like, I go deep. I have these really wild conversations with people, and I'm grateful to myself for being open enough to listen.
Excellent. And now, as the follow-up, the plugs, tell the listeners where they can find you, where they can connect with you.
Sure.
Get in touch with you.
Sure. All Things in the Name of Love is on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Google Play. I think that's it.
Okay.
And I am on Facebook. There's a Facebook page for All Things in the Name of Love.
Excellent.
I'm on LinkedIn, Erica Risberg, Twitter, Erica's VOs, and Instagram, Dr. Erica Risberg.
Great. And all that's going to be in the show notes. Well, thank you so much. This has been a pleasure. We're definitely going to collab in this podcast community. I learned so much from you. And I really, really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, Phil. I really, really, really appreciated it too. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends. And like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity of Movement. Thanks for listening.